welcome to the DFO Fantasy Show Team Preview Series. I'm Managing Fantasy Editor of Daily Faceoff.com, Brock Seguin, and today we will be covering the Calgary Flames. The Flames are one of the most surprising teams in the NHL a season ago, narrowly, and I mean narrowly, missing out on the playoffs in the Western Conference. But the sportsbooks don't expect them to get back to the postseason in 2026 either. They're projected to have an 11-point decrease from last season, ranking them 12th in the Western Conference and 23rd overall in the NHL with just 85 points. When you take a look at the forward group, it's a mixture of players in their mid-30s and players just entering their prime. Let's start with some of the veterans first. Nazem Kadri was one of my favorite sleepers a season ago as he was going in the 14th round. He posted 35 goals and 67 points, so there's a little bit more respect being put on his name this season. In the early Yahoo ADPs, he's going in the 8th round. Now, there's probably not much untapped potential and upside with Kadri, but he's rarely missing games and has averaged 29 goals and 37 assists for 66 points per 82 games in 3 years with the Flames. He's also been a great source of shots on goal and power play points, so he's a relatively inexpensive category stuffer if you plan on waiting for centers on draft day. Expect much more of the same from Kadri in 2026 as he's entrenched as the Flames' #1 center. Kadri's most frequent line mate last season was Jonathan Huberdeau, who had his best season in a Flames uniform. It's still a far cry from the numbers we saw him put up in Florida, but it makes him a worthwhile dart throw in the last 3 rounds of your draft. He finished the season on a 25-goal, 71-point pace in his final 30 games, so there is some hope that he can regain some of that elite form from 2022. The other elder statesmen in Calgary are Michael Backlund and Blake Coleman, both of whom are going undrafted. Both will make for solid streaming candidates during the season, especially Coleman with his ability to rack up shots on goal and hits, but both lack the upside that's worth spending a draft pick on. Speaking of upside, Matt Coronato probably has the most among the Flames forward group. He's coming off a strong 2025 season, scoring 24 goals with 47 points in 77 games. And he finished with 8 goals and 15 points in his final 18 games, while averaging over 19 minutes per game. If he gets that kind of usage all season this year, he was a real threat for 35 goals, 35 assists, and 200-plus shots. I really like Matt Coronato entering 2025-26. Connor Zary is another name worth adding to your post-draft watch list. He's averaged 19 goals and 24 assists per 82 games throughout his first 117 career games with the Flames. And if he gets a more expanded role and more ice time this season, we could see the offense take off a little bit. But again, I probably am not wasting a draft pick on Zary, but he's somebody worth adding to the watch list after the draft. On the blue line is where things get very interesting for the Flames. Mackenzie Weegar has the highest ADP of any Flames player for good reason. He is a category stuffer no matter your league format. He can give you double-digit goals, 50 points, 200-plus shots, blocks, and hits. He's a true unicorn and probably the only defenseman in the NHL that can achieve all of those numbers in the same season. He's a great pick, especially in banger leagues or leagues that count blocks, hits, anything of the sort. He is a great option on the blue line. Then you have Rasmus Andersson, who has been a consistent fantasy producer for years, but has been in the trade rumor mill all summer. Nothing has happened yet. And really, even if he does get traded or not, he'll still be a serviceable number 4 fantasy defenseman and kind of on the fringe of being on rosters. And that's how he's being drafted right now. So I still like Andersson even if he remains in Calgary as a very late pick as your 4th option. The most interesting name of the group is Zayne Parekh. He was the 9th overall pick in 2024 and had an outrageous 107 points, 33 goals, and 74 assists in 61 OHL games last season. According to hockeyprospecting.com, that is the exact same NHLE of 43 as Lane Hutson in his draft plus 1 year in 2023. And we all know what Hutson was able to do last season. With Weegar and Andersson both still on the roster, Parekh's path to huge minutes and power play one time isn't as clear as Hutson's was last season with just Mike Matheson in his way, but he might be too good to keep off the ice if he sticks with the team. His ADP will be one to keep an eye on this fall, and there may not be a young defenseman with as high of upside as Parekh's in the double-digit rounds of the draft this season. And now we'll move to the crease, where this is obviously Dustin Wolf's crease. Wolf has been a highly touted prospect thanks to his dominant WHL and AHL stints, and he showed that he can be a high-end NHL goalie last season. He was 11th in the NHL in wins with 29. He was tied for 9th in save percentage with a .910 and tied for 16th in goals against average with a .264. He was an absolute steal, one of my favorite picks last year in the 14th round, but is being drafted as a top 10 goalie this year with an average ADP of 59.5, 100 picks earlier than last year. Given the sportsbook's outlooks on the Flames this year, that price might be a touch too rich for me right now. I think he's better suited as your high-end number 2 fantasy goalie option than he is as a low-end number 1 fantasy goalie. and I'm now joined by Ryan Pike, managing editor of Flames Nation of the Nation Network. Thanks for coming on, Ryan. How are you?
I'm really well. How about yourself?
Very well. Can't complain. Getting very excited for the NHL, the fantasy hockey season to start. So we're going to cover the kind of most pressing issues about the Flames when it comes to fantasy hockey. But before we get into the nitty gritty, Ryan, I'm wondering, who do you think is due for a breakout campaign from the Flames in 25-26?
I'm going to give you two because I'm indecisive. One of them is Morgan Frost. So bit of big picture context for this. The Flames have two really consistent established NHL centers in Nazem Kadri, who is their offensive ace, and Michael Backlund, who is their two-way guy. And all due respect to those guys, they're well into their 30s. And so it's become sort of a priority for the Flames to sort of build out some guys who are on the other side of 30. And Morgan Frost was the big piece they acquired last year in that trade with Philadelphia at the end of January. And he is young. He's a center. And I think the challenge is, they went through so many changes in terms of systems and personnel and coaching in Philadelphia. And it's not really clear yet what Morgan Frost is. And I think for the Flames, they really like Frost. They really like his speed, his abilities in all three zones. And, last year, his time as a Flame was, he was fine. He didn't put up, amazing numbers. But if you look at his underlyings, his PDO was just atrocious. Like, he had horrible puck luck. And so I think with a summer to adjust to playing in Canada and to his new surroundings and just be able to clear his head and just sort of focus on being the best Morgan Frost he can be, along with a 2-year contract with the Flames, I think he is really set up to be a guy the Flames lean on heavily this year. He'll be probably given an opportunity to play in every game situation, especially on the power play. He'll be on a line that probably gets some offensive zone high ground, given the fact that the Flames tend to operate with two more defensive zone lines buried and a couple of lines that are given a bit more ozone time. And so if you're Frost, you're going to be given all kinds of opportunities to play with the puck, especially in the offensive zone. And the Flames are pretty optimistic that he can be a player that really pops for them offensively. My dark horse, though, is a guy that's already kind of broken out but could find another level to his game, and that's Mackenzie Weegar. The elephant in the room in Calgary is that at some point, Rasmus Andersson will probably find himself with a new address. And before that happened, Mackenzie Weegar's arguably already surpassed Andersson as the Flames' defensive ace. When/if Andersson is moved, Weegar will be the undisputed ace of that defensive group and will be leaned on even more than he is. And he's a guy that I think there's a little bit of a buzz about around the league. He was just recently named to Canada's orientation camp roster for the Olympics. He's going to be in the Olympic mix. I don't think it's unfair to say that based on his performance the last few years, he's starting to get a little bit of Norris buzz. And so he's going to be a guy that will be on the ice pretty much anytime the Flames need someone to do something defensively, offensively, or otherwise from the blue line. And so I think, you're going to lose a guy for the Flames who's playing 23 to 25 minutes a night in Andersson. And I think a lot of those minutes, especially as they ease Zayne Parekh into the NHL lineup a bit, they're really going to be leaning on Mackenzie Weegar. And I think if he can perform with expanded minutes and an expanded role anywhere as well as he has with his existing role, I think he could be a guy that really opens a lot of eyes league-wide.
Yeah, just going back to Frost for a second, like he couldn't have been any more unlucky in Calgary. He just shot 5.2%, well below his about 10% career mark. And then the on-ice shooting percentage is just 8.5% as well. So nothing was going in when he was on the ice. But let's stick with Zayne Parekh here for a second. Do you think he's a type of player, like obviously maybe something has to give with Rasmus Andersson first, but do you think he's a player that makes this team out of training camp? Like, is there a path for Parekh to be a full-time NHL player this season? And if so, like coming off a 107-point OHL season is pretty incredible. He had the exact same D1 NHLE as Lane Hutson did when he was in college. So, I mean, we saw what Lane Hutson was able to do in his first NHL season. Is Parekh a guy that can make this team and make it a huge impact in year one?
He's going to have to play his way off the team. The Flames have been pretty open about the fact that Zayne Parekh, all due respect to the Ontario League, Parekh has nothing left to accomplish at that level. He's when you're putting up offensive numbers that get you comparisons with Bobby Orr, you're probably ready for another challenge. And so I think the nice thing is, the Flames are very well aware of other things going on around the league. And I think they've really studied sort of what made Lane Hutson work in Montreal. I mean, one of it is just Lane Hutson's a hell of a player, but I think how he was used and how they eased him in is I think something they're going to be paying attention to. I think they've been able to, in the last few years, sort of ease guys in and then basically take the training wheels off and sort of throw them to the wolves in the back half of the season. So I think much like the Flames did with Dustin Wolf last year, the first half of the year, the Flames basically tried to put Wolf in a situation where he could succeed. And so for Parekh, I think we'll see him, especially if Anderson's still on the roster, sheltered a bit in terms of his deployments. Maybe you're going to see a lot of him on the power play. You'll probably see a lot of him in terms of some more favorable 5-on-5 matchups. And, I think they'll pick and choose where they use him, but he's a guy that, if he gets those puck touches and if he's feeling confident with the puck, he's someone that you can sort of mix and match with. And the nice thing for the Flames is, I mentioned Mackenzie Weegar. Weegar can play left side or right side. And so if you're Parekh and you're really comfortable on the right side and maybe you want to give, Zayne Parekh a few extra shifts, plunk him with Weegar, and I think he'll do okay. So I think it's going to be something that they continually monitor and tweak throughout the year. But I think there's a lot of confidence in the player and a lot of anticipation in the organization in terms of what he can do because, I think they do their best to try to keep the expectations realistic for young players. But he has the potential to be a really special player for the team.
Yeah, like if you just look at what Lane Hutson did last year too, right? Like didn't really start on the top power play unit at the start of the year. They kind of eased him in. And, if Anderson's gone, I mean, Parekh really makes him kind of expendable and he's a guy that can step right in and make that power play, top power play unit potentially very, very potent. It's a top power play unit that was kind of middle of the pack, bottom half of the league last year, really bad a couple years ago. So they could probably use an infusion of young talent there. You mentioned Dustin Wolf there briefly. He made me look incredibly smart last year. I hope he does it again this year. I had him as one of my sleeper favorites. I had him on a lot of my fantasy teams, and it worked out very, very well. What does Dustin Wolf have for an encore? Do we think he's the type of guy that can push for 60 starts, 35 wins this season? Like, he was just left off of Team USA's orientation camp. He basically said it himself. He's got to play his way onto that team at this point. Is that a little bit of extra motivation that he needs to just absolutely light it up early in the year?
The thing I like about Dustin Wolf is he absolutely has a chip on his shoulder in the best way. I mean, for your listeners who are not familiar with his background, he was drafted fourth from last in the 2019 draft because I believe he was listed at either 5'11" or 6 feet. Either way, short for a goalie, but for regular people, that's reasonably tall. He was one of the statistical leaders in the Western League in his draft year, barely got drafted. Then he followed up with being back-to-back Western League Goalie of the Year, back-to-back AHL Goalie of the Year, AHL MVP. If we're being completely honest here, his performance in the American League made Jacob Markstrom expendable and allowed the Flames to make that kind of move in a trade that got them Cullen Potter and Kevin Ball. And now, he came in last year with a lot of questions about can an undersized goalie from the AHL be what he was at other levels of the NHL? And the answer was a resounding yes. He was the Flames' most important player, bar none. And I think he's going to take a lot of lessons from that first year. They had the benefit of having a veteran backup on Dan Vladar. And so first half of the year until about January, they had training wheels on Wolf a bit. They didn't throw him to the Wolves. They gave him favorable starts that he got the more favorable matchup in back-to-backs. The second half of the year, it's like they went, all right, here's the keys. Do what you need to do. And he basically pushed them within a tiebreaker of a playoff spot in his first year of the NHL. So he's going to be really motivated. He's going to be really, really leaned on quite a bit. The Flames, they lost Dan Vladar this offseason to free agency. His backup will be one or both of Devin Cooley and Ivan Prosvetov. Cooley was one of the American League's best players in the first half of last season. Then he got hurt, and then his numbers sort of nosedived because when he came back, he just didn't have his mojo going. Prosvetov has always been sort of a peculiar player because he's shown flashes of brilliance in the NHL and the AHL and the KHL, to be honest. But he's just never really been able to put together a body of work in the NHL to really say, I'm a full-timer. And so while the Flames have a couple of question marks behind him, they're going to be throwing, probably 2 out of 3 starts to Wolf easily. So if he's going to get 60 starts, I bet on it. Is he going to get? He got to 29 wins last year. My guess is he's in that neighborhood again. I'd say north of 30 is probably realistic. I'd say if he gets to 35 wins, the Flames are easily in the playoffs because if your best player is playing that well, I think it means a lot of other things are going well too. So I'd say 60 games definitely. 35 wins, I'd say it's a possibility, a strong possibility.
So after the Four Nations Cup last year, Wolf started at 74% of the Flames games down the stretch, which would equal exactly 60 starts this year. So I think it's definitely, I would imagine that's kind of the Flames' plan, right? Especially like as you mentioned, with a couple question marks behind him. I think if he can start 75% of the games, they would be in a good spot. And one final question here: after a slow start to 24-25, Jonathan Huberdeau looked a lot more like his old self from December through the end of the season. He finished on a 30-goal, 40 assists per 82 game pace in his final 57 games. Do you think there's a realistic shot that Jonathan Huberdeau could return to a point per game player in Calgary?
Yeah, I think it's a big possibility. He really wanted to have a bigger role in the team last year. He met with the coaching staff over the summer, and the product of that was they threw him on the penalty kill. And as a result, he was touching the puck a lot more in all game situations, and he was a difference maker. And so, I don't know if he's going to get to his 115 point form of a few years ago, but there's still some quite a bit of tread left on those tires. And Huberdeau, especially once he got used to his new role and playing as much as he did in the game situations he was in, I think he was easily one of the Flames' 3 or 4 best forwards. So if Huberdeau is able to continue playing with the puck on his stick and is able to sort of utilize his vision, and especially if he's playing with guys like potentially the likes of Coronado or Sharon Govich or some other guys who can put the puck in the net, I think if he's on with some finishers, I think there's a distinct possibility of him being point per game.
You mentioned him briefly there, Matt Coronado. I just want to talk about him for a second because he's one of the most interesting players from a Flames perspective. And me and you were talking before we started this recording that he basically had his breakout last year, finished the season really strong, 15 points in his final 18 games, on pace for nearly 215 shots there down the stretch. A guy that loves to shoot the puck, a guy that started to play like north of 19 minutes a night later in the season. Like, how big of a step forward can Matt Coronado take here this season? Is he a guy that's basically a lock for 30-30 at this point?
I think he's definitely in that neighborhood. And I think the nice thing for Coronado is because he played some center and killed penalties at lower levels, he's got a really good awareness of where he needs to be on the ice in all 3 zones. And it makes him a really valuable player for a team like the Flames that have to really rely on breakouts and being very, very conscientious with their chances. I mean, he's probably got the best shot of the team, if not the one of the best 2 or 3 shots in the team. And he has the instincts, he has the smarts, he has the shot, and he's becoming someone that's really leaned upon in key game situations. So I think, I mentioned how, Dustin Wolf's going to play with a bit of a chip on his shoulder. I think Coronado with his new contract, I think he wants to prove that he's not just a guy you can play on your first line, he's a first liner. And so we saw flashes of that down the stretch with him being, just basically a point per game pace at the keys, the most important time of the year. If he can do that 2/3 of the year or more, then I think 30-30 is a lock for him.
Ryan, this has been fun. Thank you so much for stopping by, and we will see you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Hey hockey fans, if you enjoyed that video, then make sure you hit the subscribe button right here on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. We have you covered for everything you need. Exclusive interviews on The Sheet with Jeff Merrick, all the latest hockey news on Daily Faceoff Live, and you can always get your morning started with Johnny Lazarus and Colby Cohn on Morning Cup of Hockey. Don't miss a minute. Hit that subscribe button.